The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
God is a solution. God, the 12-step.
I like where he's going here.
Helps the community grow, helps us grow. Monty has done a phenomenal job.
And you're talking about taking people through a spiritual process, getting them into recovery.
Thanks, Monty, and thanks for all your support.
We need spirituality to make this thing work long term.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
And now, broadcasting on location somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific Northwest, it's the over-opinionated 12-stepologist, the Monty'man.
Well, greetings, everyone. I am your host, the Monty'man, here, of course, on the Take 12 Recovery radio show. I thought I would bring back from the archives from December of 2020 a topic which I think we should revisit more often than we do. It's entitled Respecting the Newcomer. Now, my co-hosts, Denver, Marv, and Margie join me on this topic, and I think it's worth a listen. So let's pick it up after we came back from all of our nonsense and goofing around and go straight to the topic, respecting the newcomer. Not always is the newcomer, and I'm talking about the person who's new to recovery, coming in specifically to the rooms of the 12-step fellowships and other recovery support settings, recovery support meetings. People that have never been there before, people that are maybe checking it out for the first time. Maybe they've been there once and they didn't know what to think and they came back or whatever, but they're relatively new or brand new. And some of them are, maybe they're there from the nudge of a judge. Maybe they're there as an ultimatum from a friend, a family member. Maybe they're there because they've just had enough and they don't know what else to do. Maybe they're scared, embarrassed. They just don't know which way's up, and it's all they can do to walk through that door. And they make it through that door, and whether they sit down at the first chair they see next to the door, or in the middle of the room, or on the other side of the room, no matter where they sit, right? They are still brand new, and it's tough. And it's tough. They may be angry. They may be bitter. They may have a resentment because they feel like they're forced to be there. They may be beating themselves up. They may be extremely humble and ready for some positive change. And everything in between, right? Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. So before we actually talk about the proper way to treat those folks or not to treat those folks, what about you guys? Margie, when you first walked in the doors, what were you thinking? How were you feeling?
Well, when I first walked in the doors of AA, I was it was almost 30 years ago, and it was in Salem. I knew I needed to stop drinking, and I had stopped, but it was probably like my third day sober. I'd never been to AA before, ever. Mm-hmm. I went to this club in Salem called the SOS Club.
Ah, yes.
And I didn't know any better. I didn't know there was churches and things that had meetings, and I was kind of surprised, I guess, and scared. It was a pretty gnarly club, a lot of biker guys and rough-looking people, and but I went, and I kept going, and it was scary.
Why did you go back? Was there something that attracted you?
Yeah, it was just the fact that these people, despite their exterior roughness, they were like me. They, didn't want to drink. And they had drinking problems. And, being brand new to the program, I didn't know that there was this whole group of people that got together and talked about their problems and that there was a solution. And, ultimately my neighbor, who come to find out, he ended up giving me my first big book. And he told me Margie, there are actually churches you can go to for AA. And so I ended up going to a church. Not that there's anything wrong with this SOS club at all. It's just, it was a little softer, easier for me to go to the
different
churches.
Environment.
But, I still went back to that SOS club on Saturday nights for a meeting they had every Saturday night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before you walked in the doors, though, what kind of impression had you received from TV, literature, whatever? How did you hear about Alcoholics Anonymous? What was your preconceived ideas?
Well, it was a long time ago, but, I don't know that I had a lot of preconceived ideas. I should have, because I went to college, I graduated, I was educated, I was a professional in my career, but I really didn't know.
You didn't know what to expect.
Nothing about AA at that time, so it was all really new to me.
Was there something in you that said, okay, these two letters, AA, something about that means there's help? Was there at least that?
Yeah.
Going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody somewhere must have mentioned it to me, or I did a little research or something, but I just knew I needed help because I was to the point where, I had 2 little children. I couldn't stop drinking. I drank from morning until night. I was passed out all the time for my children, and I just knew my life had to change. So I thought, I gotta give this a try.
So was there more that attracted you at that first meeting than detracted you? There was because you came back.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the fact that, I felt nobody was, everybody was welcoming, despite the fact that I was kind of different than their average member, but not really. I was drunk just like everybody else, but I don't know. I just felt like I had a chance if I kept going to those meetings.
You didn't feel condemned or like people were looking down at you or judging you or anything?
Not really. I really didn't.
Nice.
Now in the future, in years to come, because I've been in and out of AA a lot, there were times where I would go back after being out for a while, and I felt judged, kind of, But
as somebody that was brand new, you didn't.
No, I didn't.
Right.
I didn't.
Right. Denver, what about you? What was your experience?
Which one?
The very first time. The very first time you walked through any kind of support system that was going to address your alcoholism.
All right. There's a couple experiences that have always just stuck with me, and they always will. Early in 90s probably, I went to a meeting down in Cresswell, and I come to find out later they were the AA Nazis.
Ah.
I walked into that meeting, and they took an inventory. The boy with his boots up on the desk and his worn-out easy chair took an inventory on me and told me just what I wasn't.
So explain that. You walked in, and was he checking you up one side and down the other?
As I walked in the door.
Really?
I said, "Hi, I'm here for a meeting." And he said things I'm not going to even repeat today.
Oh, wow.
That really bothered me. And I never went back to that meeting again. And I said, screw AA.
So that was your first impression?
That was my first.
Of the fellowship?
Yes. Yeah. And I when you ask where did I learn about it, I don't know either exactly where I picked up the AA label. But I knew that I heard that it helped people. And I was down to, I need to try something different because what I'm doing ain't working.
Yeah.
So, and then I went back out for quite some time. Never
Drinking.
never touched that idea again. And I ended up in Sweet Home at Survivors up there, and I walked.
Was that the hut, or was
no? That
church?
was down at the Methodist church.
At the Methodist
there.
church, okay.
Yeah.
Upstairs in the loft.
No, it was down.
Oh, it was downstairs. Okay.
Yeah, and so I ended up there, and I walked in, sit down at the tables, and I didn't realize that they separated men from women. So I walked in, and there's a couple members there, and I know everybody knows Mick from
right.
There,
he was my first sponsor.
Yeah, I love the guy.
Yeah.
So he's across the table, and I thought, well, I'll sit over here because I don't really know you, and and we can look at each other.
Mm-hmm.
I come to find out that was on the women's side of the table. I didn't know. I didn't know they separated people up there.
Oh, so they actually, but in the same meeting.
Yes,
the women sat on one side and the men sat on the other.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know that. And,
did you know that, Marv?
No, I didn't.
And Mick knew that, and he's looking at me smiling. And I guess here over time, as all the women are sitting on my side, and I'm thinking, man, I'm lucky. Nah, wrong idea here. Anyways, I fell in love with that meeting, and that's where I actually got pretty involved.
So what was it about that meeting, though, that brought you back to that one?
Hillbillies.
Oh, okay.
They were, you know what, it's like you said, we're drunks, or what? We're there for the same purpose.
Yeah.
And these people were simple enough. Mm. They weren't uppity like the guy with his boots up there on the desk telling me what I ain't going to be or who I am. These people were pretty simple. Now, there's gruff ones there, mind you, that I didn't, they kind of scared me. They scared me because I'm new. Mm-hmm. But there was other ones that were pretty common, and I could listen to them.
Right.
I learned a long time ago at meetings, I don't always want to talk. I want to listen.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
Yeah, it kept me coming back for quite a few years up there.
Now, Marv, your first meeting was actually, unbeknownst to you, God was working on something in your life, but you thought you were there for somebody else, right?
Well, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was, while Margie and Denver were talking, I was thinking about it. God was in the whole thing.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
But part of my deal is, most people don't know this, but I had a profound spiritual experience 3 or 4 years before I ever went to AA.
Oh.
And in that time period, I did a lot of studying, went to church. My whole life had turned upside down because of that spiritual experience. And so I say this quite a bit. When I went for my alcoholic wife to the meeting,
right,
I had preconceived ideas of what spirituality meant.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, it meant Christ to me.
Right.
And it's really strange how this worked because I'm not a very socialistic, gregarious type person. And, you were talking about being scared or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I was. I didn't really want to go, but I'm bound determined that in my mind I'm supposed to, that I needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And what was strange about it is the first thing I saw when I walked in the room was the 12 steps and the traditions on the wall. And I quickly went over them, and there was not one word about Christ. And so immediately I started to disregard the whole thing. I thought, no, there's something wrong here,
Mm-hmm.
And that's just my own narrow-mindedness.
Right.
But the interesting thing is I wasn't in the meeting 20 minutes or a half hour when the profound thought occurred to me, I need to change my way of thinking. And I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
There was just this profound intuitiveness that struck me, and as you know, I went later and talked to a pastor of a church, and
right.
He said, "Marv, don't question it; it works." And then I had I'm trying to shorten this up, but I had another experience on the drive home that confirmed to me that AA was okay. There was nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And so I was at peace with it.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of it, though, is I never did for a long time felt comfortable because of my own personal thing about people. It took me a while to get over that.
Yeah.
And I still have that, a little bit of that, but so.
Because there's an element of social interaction within meetings.
Yeah.
Just because, unless it's just you and one other person, right? And even that's social, but you know what I mean. And that's not always comfortable for you, right? A lot of people and that kind of thing. Yeah. It's interesting because you bring up a point that seldom do I hear anybody bring this up, but I had a similar experience in the sense of I was a Christian and I didn't see anything about Christ in the meetings, right? But I read it in the big book on page 11 where Bill's talking about his experience with Christ, you know, and the idea of Christ. And so I saw that and I thought, I'm going to read the rest of this book. After I read Bill's story, it interests me, and nobody told me to do that, right? But I was like, I hear a lot, you know, in meetings I will hear people say, if I saw Christ in any of the literature, I would never have come back. And yet I'm like, I'm glad I did, because it is what brought me back. And we have a tendency to not think that way. We think, well, in fact, I've heard people say that have been going to meetings for years, if I had seen God on the wall, I would not have come back. And yet God was on the wall several times, the word God, and they're still there. They did come back. Yeah. So we assume that if Jesus is spoken, people aren't going to come back. But there's a lot of people that don't come back because he's not spoken. So we should not make those assumptions that, you know, I'm like, you know, some people say, well, if I didn't hear a lot of cussing, I wouldn't have felt at home. Well, I didn't appreciate all the cussing. I didn't feel at home because I'm just not the cussing kind of guy. I'm just not that guy. So there's all these different experiences we have, and yet all three of us kept coming back. Something brought us back, and I think that's the power of God doing that. Because I was very closed-minded about some things too.
You know, the other part real quick too, I'll say is when I first started on that journey, one of my character defects was either things were right or they were wrong. They were black or they were white.
Yeah, very black and white thing. Yeah.
And so I went into AA with a belly full of scripture, which in my mind was regimented, and that was right.
Sure.
And anything beside that was wrong. So I had that going against me because of my preconceived ideas. And what AA has taught me, and I hope people hear this, is that with God, don't put him in a box, because there is so much gray area that AA, particularly in my case anyway, has shown me that it really allowed me to kind of let go of that old regimental do's and don'ts and stuff like that.
I saw a post on Facebook this morning. It said the problem isn't so much letting God in as it is letting God out.
Yeah.
And I thought, boy, that's good, right? Letting him out of that box that we put him in. And when we do that, we actually bring him down to our level, right? And we put those boundaries on him, and he's so much bigger than our boundaries and our levels. So let's talk about respecting the newcomer. Many of us have experienced
Oh, goodness.
Ooh, Denver's getting a call. Who is it, Denver?
I have no idea.
It's just Bucky.
Forgot to silence.
It says Monty. I don't know.
No, I'm trying to get to the volume on it.
That's funny. Is mine off? I don't even know if mine's off.
We didn't get that add return to call screen.
Okay. Anyway.
Wow.
That was fun.
Yeah, I apologize.
Most of us, if we've been around a while, here's a statement I heard one time. If you don't think there's not any bad meetings, you haven't been to enough meetings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've heard that.
Could be your first one.
Because I've heard people say, oh, there's no such thing as a bad meeting. I understand the sentiment behind that because depending on your mindset and your maturity level in recovery, you can take what somebody might perceive as a bad meeting and flip that on its head and really benefit from it and really get some really good stuff out of it, right? But not everybody's at that point. And like I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of people when they come in, they're at a whole different places in their mindset and their heart and their fears and their anticipations and all that kind of thing. And if you've been around long enough, you've probably heard people being mistreated. You've probably had an occasion to hear somebody tell somebody who is relatively new, if not brand new, to shut up, sit down, take the cotton out of your mouth, out of your ears, shove it in your mouth, and listen. Now, I actually haven't heard that for a while, but I know it still goes on. I'm not so sure why, because I don't see that in the big book anywhere. I don't see it in the NA Basic Text. I don't see it in any of the literature from Celebrate Recovery or any of the other mainstream groups, Cocaine Anonymous, any of those guys, to where we shame somebody who's brand new. But I know it happens. Why does it happen? Why do people feel like they got to control the guy who's brand new and put him in his place? Your thoughts? Marv?
I need to think about it a minute.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Margie.
Well, it seems like it would be just in my humble opinion, personality, character defect on the part of the person doing the shaming, because maybe they have low self-esteem. Maybe they their program isn't strong. Maybe they feel the need to feel better than others. Some of those character defects, and I don't know. It's sad when that happens, but I specifically remember when I had about right around 5 years sobriety. I would go to meetings, and somebody would come in and say, "Oh, I relapsed," and I remember thinking, how could you do that? How could you drink again? I would never do that. I'll never do that. And, I always say God has a sense of humor, because I made it 5 years, and then since then I've basically been in and out for all kinds of different periods of time, relapsing. So, I don't know. I just feel like people that treat others with that way possibly have character defects of their own. Possibly their program is not strong. That's all I can think of, really.
Yeah. So why do you think you got treated at your first meeting by the guy with the boots on the desk, Denver? I mean, looking back at it now, not from the viewpoint when you've experienced it, but now.
Right, and I have a hard time shaking that out of me with him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is his character defect that shone brightly that day to me. I don't know. Possibly he found sobriety through somebody that talked that way to him. And maybe he did care for me, and he was just going to tough love me.
Right.
But I didn't need that at that time. You know, I didn't. It's my first time ever in a meeting. I'm scared shit. Excuse me.
Sure.
But, I mean, that one hit me totally wrong.
Yeah.
But, looking back, like I said, he may have found sobriety that way. That wasn't how I was going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's... So my experience was, as somebody who had lived on the streets, they chewed me up and spit me out. I didn't need somebody else to chew me up and spit me out.
Right.
You know, my first experience, my very first meeting I ever attended was in Stockton, California. And some of you have heard the story before, but I walked in. It was a very narrow, long room. It had those 8-foot tables end to end, and you could barely walk behind somebody because that's how narrow the room was. And at one end, there was a fan in a broken window with blackberry bushes coming through the window, intertwined with the fan. You know, the smoke in there was like pea soup. This is back when you could smoke in the meetings. And you'd walk in, you'd open up this glass door, and smoke would come billowing out, right? It was right next door to, I think it was an Alano club. And this old codger looks at me and he goes, "Kid, are you an alcoholic?" No, he goes, "Kid, are you a drug addict?" And it was an AA meeting. And I said, I don't know what I am. "Well, whatever you are, you're in the right place." And he patted my hand, right? And he pulled the chair out, and I sat down. And I instantly felt like I was going to be okay. The second meeting I ever attended, I had a T-shirt on with a fish on the pocket, a Christian fish on the pocket. Nobody knew that. It was just a fish. It was just my Christian T-shirt that I had. And the chairperson got up, met me at the door, and told me that Jesus freaks weren't welcome there. And so I left. And I went back to the smoke-filled room in the other part of Stockton, California. And I went back there. And I always felt like God allowed me to see both sides of the fence. Right? You're going to have these guys, and you're going to have these guys. You know, so you get to pick which one you want to go to. Right? Just like what's your favorite grocery store? What church you want to attend? Where do you want to eat? Right? There's enough meetings, there's enough fellowships around where you can find your home. And you don't have to put up with the mistreatment. It was years later that somebody actually threw a rock through the back of my windshield at my home group that I had been a member of for years, and told me to get out of there because I was, you know, we don't want you Jesus freak. I never found out who that was. I stopped the car. I rolled down the window. I looked back, and everybody scattered. Never did know who that was. But it brought me back to the memory of that second meeting. And I thought, what is going on? The fact is, we're going to have people who disrespect each other within the fellowship. And we're going to have people that highly respect and honor each other within the fellowship. And we cannot allow the people that are being disrespectful to push us out of a seat that we worked so hard to get to. But there's something to be said about training. There's something to be said about sponsorship. You know, we know that over 60% of the people in 12-step support meetings today do not utilize sponsors. We know that there are seminars and training courses for GSRs and chair people and, you know, all sorts of things that people don't go to or attend. You know, I think we could do better in our 12-step meetings as far as that stuff goes. How quickly are we putting people behind that chair position up front without really qualifying them? Just because they have a certain amount of time, should we be sticking them behind the mic? I don't know. What do you think, Marv?
Well, that's one of the things I was thought of when I asked you to give me time to think.
Yeah.
How important the chairperson is in a meeting. My sponsor years ago used to say to me, he said, you know what, the chairperson sets the tone of the meeting.
You bet.
And if a lot of these people get up there and chair and they're putting on a show. And so then coming back to the original topic of the newcomer, how does that make a newcomer feel?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know about anybody else, but I can pick up on the fact that somebody's sincere or not sincere. Or, I mean, I'm not stupid. I'm alcoholic. That's the way with most people.
Right.
They know.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you mentioned, too, was sponsors. And I have seen this, I'll bet you guys have, too, through the years, that after you're around a while, you get to know who's sponsoring who, and if nothing else, just by association.
Yeah.
And also, I've noticed in that happening, how much the sponsee turns into being like the sponsor.
Sure.
So if the sponsor is a Nazi, thump the big book, regimental, this is by golly the way it's going to be,
right,
his sponsee's going to be that way. And that's the way they're going to treat a newcomer.
Yeah.
So
true enough. Very, very true. It's amazing to me when you look at the family tree of the sponsee and their sponsor and their sponsor and their sponsor. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people misquote the big book or take something out of context or say something is in the literature that isn't even in there. Because not at their fault, because their sponsor told them that, and their sponsor told them that. Well, my sponsor wouldn't lie to me, right? And so they're getting these things, from a family history, a sponsor family history of stuff that's inaccurate. And so then what we end up having is somebody that is teaching something that is other than what is actually in the book. And then somebody catches that and sees that. It's very frustrating because you can do a lot of damage. I mean, it's like repairing a broken vehicle. If I want to repair the 57 Chevy, I don't take the manual from the Volkswagen. But we're doing that a lot of the time. One of the pieces of literature that slid under the door just barely is called a little yellow pamphlet called Living Sober, right? If you read Living Sober and you read the big book, you would swear it's two different fellowships. And so if I'm teaching that, or the 12 and 12, if you're teaching that the 12 and 12 is the guide for working the steps and not the big book, you're going to misguide people because that is not the directions for working the steps. Those are commentaries. Those are it's a wonderful helps for it. In fact, we have a show that we did after walking through the big book called Walking Through the 12 and 12 that you can download for fun and for free here at Take12Radio.com by clicking on Recovery Workshops. And it's very helpful, but it's not the formula for working the steps. That's in the big book. But a lot of people are teaching something other than that because they were taught that. So there's a lot of misinformation going on. But I think respecting somebody that's new, showing them grace, showing them mercy, giving them, room to breathe, to make mistakes, to say the wrong thing without being criticized publicly.
Meeting them right where they're at.
Where they're at will cover a multitude of sins of all the other stuff. Because you're going to keep or lose that person in that first hour to an hour and a half. And if you have a smoke break, you may lose them at the break. And people say, well, then they weren't ready. No. That's a cop-out. That is a cop-out if you're treating them rudely or you're correcting them publicly, and they take off, right, you got to take some responsibility for that. Because they're not mature enough to let that roll off their shoulders yet. They're just not. And how often I've seen people that are brand, and I've been guilty of this, people that are brand new come in and nobody talks to them. And you know, the chairperson will say, is there anybody here for their first meeting ever? And the person said, hi, I'm Fred. Everybody goes, hi, Fred, and that's it. Nothing else. And at the smoke break or afterwards, everybody goes their separate ways, and not one person says hi to Fred. That can be disrespectful. But how refreshing it is when you see somebody go up to Fred, right? And not just pour them a cup of coffee, but sit next to them or hand them one of the IP pamphlets, or do you have a big book? I've been in meetings where they say, hey, we got a big book for you. And they'll send it around the meeting, everybody will sign it, and they'll hand it to the guy. That's amazing stuff. You know, are these conventions where the person has the least amount of time, they'll put them on their shoulders, and they'll take them up to the front, and they'll give them a big book. You know, that stuff like that gives me goosebumps.
I've seen Marv buy several big books for brand new newcomers at meetings.
Yeah, that's good stuff. What are they? Are they still like $10 or are they more now?
Oh, yeah, $9.50, $10.
Yeah, $9.50, $10. One of the few pieces of literature that doesn't go up in price. Right?
Priceless.
But to put something in a newcomer's hand, right? Not just a phone number. If that's all you got, that's fine. The other thing that I think is shows a lot of respect for the newcomer is when you put your phone number down and you actually answer it. You know what I mean?
That's a two-way street, though, too.
Expound on that.
Well, you know how many times I've given out my phone number?
I never got a call.
Never got a call.
Oh, I know. Me too. Me too.
Me too.
But there are people that put their phone number down and they don't want to give you the time of day.
Yeah.
You know, and that's disrespectful. You know, but I know. And I put my name. I put down Montyman, Monty M, Monty Meyer, Monty. I mean, I've done it a million different ways, right? I'll never forget. I had a lady. It was in a 12-step, a different 12-step fellowship. She chastised me for using my last name in the fellowship, and I was pretty new to that fellowship, and I thought, oh wow, I blew that. Well, then I found out later that it's actually in the literature, in Alcoholics Anonymous, not in this other fellowship, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's conference-approved literature that says there is no place for personal anonymity within the fellowship. That we actually are to use our last names within the fellowship. But I didn't know that, right? So I was like, then, and so what I did, Marv, is like what you're saying. I heard that, and so then everybody that I heard use their last name, I chastised them. Oh, we're not supposed to do that. Because that's what I was taught, right?
Yeah.
It's wild. So, what can we do better? Let me go around the room. What can we do better when it comes to the newcomer, respecting them? Denver?
Sit next to him.
Sit next to him.
Direct him to the men's side, apparently. I don't know. Be kind, all right?
Just be kind.
Yeah, be kind. And give them a little space because they are scared.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
Don't be pushy. Offer.
Right.
Speak when they ask, and go from there.
Margie? What can we do better?
Well, okay, when a meeting that I go to frequently has a tradition where when there's a brand new newcomer enter the room, they focus on the first step, and then the whole focus of the meeting is directed toward this brand new person. And I have some concerns about that.
That can be uncomfortable.
Because
right?
I feel like someone especially brand new to the program, Number one, they're probably embarrassed. I mean, they may be embarrassed, I should say. They may be shameful. They may feel like hell. They don't want anybody to know they're there. You know, all kinds of things that could be going through their head. And I don't know that putting all that attention on them their first time in AA is the right thing to do. But yet, you know, there's the good part of it and kind of telling them that we've been there. So I guess just like Denver said, you know, give them some space, give them a little kindness. Just like Marv said, meet them where they're at and just do the best you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Marv, what can we do better?
Well, one of the things I've noticed through the years is I'll say it this way, the attack on the newcomer. And it's kind of like what Margie's saying about the first step meetings. In a way, you're just kind of you're in on top of them, you know, and they're just
spotlight.
You know, yeah, deer in the headlight type thing. You know, there's a word called discernment, and that's to me what that part of what that means is being observant and paying attention to what it is you see. In this case, it would be what you see in a newcomer. Because if you're really observant, you can see they're scared to death. Yeah. Or maybe they're angry and contempt because they have to be there. Mm-hmm. I'll step back and I'll watch and pay attention. The one thing I do, and I started doing this a while back, not the whole time I've been in AA, is I started trying to let them know that they're valuable. Because so many of us, I included, we come in and we think we're garbage. We're the bottom of the ocean, worthless. And so somehow or another, not always, but most of the time, I try to tell them, hey, you know what? You are of great value. And but I don't normally, it'll take me a while to come up to them, mainly when I hear something that I can say, oh, maybe I can help them with this, or I hear an experience that I've had and how I got through that experience or something like that. But I know I didn't like it in the beginning when people did that to me. And there was a lot of old-timers in my first meeting, and they were like vultures. You know, patience my ass, let's eat somebody. You know, and when the meeting was over, boom, here they come. You know, like ugly on ape.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, just some discernment and respect.
Yeah.
And letting them know, hey, you're valuable. We're glad you're here.
Amen. And so I think one of the things we could do better is if a newcomer doesn't know the lingo, because not all newcomers are shy. Some newcomers are very vocal, right? They like to talk. It might be a defense mechanism, you know, or it just might be that's the way they are. And if they say something wrong that isn't part of the lingo, don't publicly shame them. Don't correct them. Come on. If they say Jesus, let them be. If they say Mohammed, let them be. If they say, I'm an atheist, I don't know if I buy this God stuff, let them be.
Yeah.
Thank God they're there, you know. But don't, I mean, come on now. Just let them be who they are. You know, one of the things that going back to that old codger that asked me, are you a drug addict? And when I said, I don't know what I am, well, you're in the right place. That told me it didn't matter where I was in the right place. And he didn't care. You know what I mean? And man, because 9 times out of 10, what I am spewing out of my mouth when I'm hurting probably isn't how I really feel deep down inside anyway. But if I know that I'm okay to be just who I am at that moment, no matter what I believe, don't believe, love, hate, whatever in between, but I'm okay in that chair, I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back. And isn't that the point? So the hand of recovery needs to be not one that slaps you in the face, but one that welcomes you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think people, they're either going to remember us, oh, that's that guy that jumped down my throat, or that's that gal that corrected me, or they're going to remember us as, you know what, that person let me be me. And I'd much rather be remembered that way. There'll be plenty of time, for a little spank on the rear end. Right? Yeah. My sponsor gave me a few of those. But he was patient, and he knew when it was appropriate to correct me. And it was never... There's a slogan out there, correct privately, reward publicly. And he was quick to do that. So what are you doing, listeners out there, to respect the newcomer? In your attempt to help, are you being a hindrance? Are you being respectful and giving them dignity to be who they are? All right, our closing song, and this is in jest, okay, because it's kind of a serious topic, but I thought in jest we'll do this. This is a song by Michael Purrington called Newcomer in Love. So take it tongue-in-cheek, and then we'll close out after the song is over. Here's Michael Purrington with the song Newcomer in Love.
I saw you serving coffee at a meeting one night. You spiritually awakened me. I fell in love at first sight. I promptly admitted I was powerless over you, and to thine own self I promised to be true. Program and you are a blessing from above. The big book and the way you look are all I'm thinking of. Gee, it's great to be a newcomer in love. I turn my will and my life over to you. You're restoring me to sanity, just like step 2. I intuitively know you belong here by my side. Happy, joyous, and free. One day you'll be my recovering bride. Programming you are a blessing from above. The big book and the way you look are all I'm thinking of. Gee, it's great to be a newcomer in love. Together we could never be boring, dull, or plumb. We'll be the Bill and Lois of the new millennium. We'll fill our lives with wisdom and serenity. Someday we'll have a house full of little sponsees. Programming you are a blessing from above. The big book and the way you look are all I'm thinking
Peter Michael Purrington and the Messengers with their song, Newcomer in Love. Hey, listen, if you want more of Michael's music, in fact, if you want more recovery music in general, visit our webpage at take12radio.com. Scroll down and click on the recovery music banner, and there you will see a number of different recovery music broadcasts that you can download for fun and for free. Listen, if you're a newcomer and you're brand new to this show or to the rooms of recovery, you are welcome and you are wanted in the rooms and on this broadcast. We love you, we care about you, and we're reminding you that until our next broadcast, we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
She's a super cat, she's super kitty, meow.
Yeah, kitty, 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 meow.